Hi everyone, good day. My name is Nurien Hidayu binti Muhamad Rusly. I am from INTI International University Nilai, Negeri Sembilan here in Malaysia. I'm writing this paper with two of my co-authors. The first one is Ms. Pawani Vijayaratnam from INTI International University Nilai, and another one is Ms. Aiswari, and she is from Sunway University. Our paper entitled COVID-19 Pandemic and Online Learning, the Challenges of Instructors in Tertiary Institutions. So basically, our research paper focused on current situation, dealing with the pandemic, focusing on how it affected online learning, and the paper focused specifically on some of the challenges faced by instructors in tertiary institutions. Let me start with the introduction. Right, the worldwide spread of the COVID-19 pandemic has brought many consequences that has somehow impacted people's well-being. Specifically, for this particular research, we focus on education. The teaching and learning process has been affected, and the pandemic demanded educators and learners to actually change to alternative isolated instruction with a very minimum adjustment time. In the spring of 2020, we're talking about school across the globe, were closed in the effort to reduce the transmissions of the COVID-19 virus. This particular situation has somehow thrown educational system into disarray, and it's definitely disrupting the schooling of over 80% of the students worldwide. Most of the governments around the world have briefly closed learning institutions at every level in an effort to contain the spread of the COVID-19. Same thing happens in Malaysia. In Malaysia, the government has, as a parcel, has actually instructed for nation lockdown and closed all learning institutions, as a result of which learners amplifying from school-going children to postgrad understudies are actually affected by the decision made by the government. These have somehow required learning institutions to venture into alternative teaching and learning method to ensure that the situation did not hold the learning process. We would like to make sure that the teaching and learning process will continue as usual in the time of the pandemic. By forcing all learning institutions to move to online channels, this pandemic has somehow forced instructors to go an extra mile in preparing and delivering online lessons for students. It obviously created challenges that need to be faced by all parties. Specifically, in this particular research paper, our focus is on challenges faced by instructors in order to ensure that the learning process will be a smooth sailing journey for everyone, and the focus will be on, of course, learners. Online learning is the use of the internet and many other essential tools for the production of educational content, instructional delivery, and also the program management. Let's proceed with the literature review. COVID-19 has created pressure on the educational systems from primary up to higher education settings. During this period, learners from primary to higher education institutions are actually shifting from the traditional face-to-face lesson to online learning from the comfort of their homes. Students continue their education through online learning, and the model is currently the best alternatives, as keeping schools open poses a safety risk for the students. A learning system supported formalized teaching, but with the assistance of electronic resources known as e-learning, while teaching is often based in or out of the schoolrooms. The utilizations of computers and therefore the internet forms the main component of e-learning. E-learning also can be termed as a network-enabled transfer of skills and knowledge, and therefore the delivery of education is formed to an outsized number of recipients at an equivalent or different time. And this is according to Chitra and Raj 2018. Earlier, it was not accepted wholeheartedly because it was assumed that this technique lacked the human element required in learning. The transition from traditional face-to-face to online education somehow created a struggle in change and adaptableness among instructors globally over time, especially when handling the present millennial generation. Past research has identified key findings in teaching leading through the pandemic. Learning institution management reported that several goals will be more important, including emergency preparedness, reducing learning gaps, and addressing students' mental health. And this is according to Hamilton et al. 2020. Educators and students in learning institutions across the country have faced extensive, exceptional changes to teaching and learning because of the COVID-19 pandemic, which shuttered, which shuttered learning institutions in the year of 2020. By referring to a research on teaching styles by Al-Hussein in 2012, Ahmed and Mubin in 2013, Krishnan et al. 2019, and Vijayaratnam et al. In 2020, they're utilizing the Staffordshire Assessment of Teaching Styles tool, uncovered that most of the respondents charted the all-around flexible and adaptable teaching style, or style 1. Fascinatingly, teacher followed style 1, the all-around flexible and adaptable teaching style, disregarding certain factors like teacher's age, mode of teaching, location of institution, subject matter, and gender. According to a research by Anthony et al. 2019, Anthony conducted a quantitative research on blended learning teaching style in the classroom by applying the partial least squares structural equation modeling. The research discovered that blended learning permitted lecturers to actually reflect on their style of teaching and beliefs. And if we venture into students' learning style, the implication of external stimuli on students' learning style cannot be underestimated. Research on learning style conducted on more than 1,000 university students in Malaysia, Indonesia, and China by Sagadevan and Joy, Lai and Lee in 2019 discovered that majority of the learners are actually visual learners, and this possibly a new shared learning style of the digital natives or the millennial. If we would like to compare online learning with face-to-face learning, with the rise of pandemic situation focusing in Malaysia, institutions have switched to online learning. Online learning has a similar function to face-to-face learning in the aspects of attending classes, assignments, and also assessments. However, research has seen that online learning differs in relation to the learning pace of the students. A study done in Australia A study done in Austria, where students felt that learning independently is better off through online learning as compared to face-to-face learning. Besides, through the learning management system, or we call it as LMS, students find it easier to assess the materials that at any given time with proper support. Next, venture into the real work of a teacher in times of pandemic. We focused on research findings by Lapada in 2020 and Morehouse in 2020. The research revealed the many challenges faced by instructors, from acquiring the knowledge and skills required in delivering online classes, establishing communication with students via social media for greater engagement, having a stable internet access during class, and encouraging participation and utilizations of features in online classes, time management in the conduct of classes, and monitoring of responses, etc. Interestingly, respondents also agreed that they faced problems managing the stress caused by community quarantine at home and in between online classes demands, as well as meeting the deadlines and requirements set by the school administrators. Next, methodology. For participants, 30 participants consisting of university lecturers teaching undergraduates from institutions of higher learning in Malaysia were selected at random for this particular research. They had varying teaching experience which cut across different discipline areas. For research method, a semi-structured open-ended questionnaire was designed based on the key findings from the past research. These were then distributed to instructors in various institutions of higher learning. The responses were then analyzed for process, meaning, and understanding of faculty practices. Data analysis consisted of identifying and codifying themes through the use of constant comparative method. Once the themes were developed, a focus group discussion was held to understand at a deeper level teacher experiences in the online learning realm. Before the focus group, participants were sent a summary of the research findings and a list of questions that will be covered. Next, let us go into results and discussion, focusing on demographic characteristics of the study subjects. As shown in the slide, the highest percentage of instructors' years of teaching experience was less than 10, which is 51.6%. Second highest was between 11 to 20 years of teaching, which is 38.7, and the lowest percentage was more than 20 years of teaching, which is 9.7%. Regarding disciplines, almost half of the instructors were teaching the language, 48.4%, 6 were teaching social science disciplines, 19.4%, and the rest of the instructors were teaching the math, science, engineering, and accounting disciplines, which comprises of 32.4%. Moreover, this table revealed that the nearly equal percentage of instructors had experience in online teaching. Instructors with experience 45.2% and instructors with no experience of online teaching was 54.8%. Concerning platforms used for online learning interactions and activities, the majority of instructors used Blackboard, 54.8% as learning platform, and 35.5% of the instructors used Microsoft Teams to interact and communicate with students for online learning. An equal percentage of 3.2% of the instructors used WebCT, VLE, and Google Meet. Next, challenges faced by instructors. There are 4 main challenges highlighted in the research paper. The first one is challenges to fostering interaction in synchronous learning. All respondents mentioned about students being passive and not responding to questions in the live synchronous online classes. This lack of participation is evident when students refuse to unmute their microphone or turn on the video. The recurring themes that appear in most comments are passive, not responsive, and not attentive. This was added to the fact that students were not focusing in class as they had the advantage to watch the recording later. Interestingly, Poor communication skills were singled out by some respondents as the cause of lack of participation. A respondent summed up her frustration as follows: poor communication skills leads to a lack of motivation from students, which leads to a lack of courage to speak and the lack of ability to ask questions. Most instructors attributed this challenge to not knowing students' background and knowledge level. A similar scenario was seen by teachers in a university in Hamburg, where it was difficult to know whether students had problems as they were silent all the time, according to a research by Kula Dignity 2020. In contrast, students were seen to be actively participating in the online activities designed by the lecturers in the asynchronous classes. This has caused stress for lecturers as they were running out of ideas to maintain active online teaching mode. Next challenge is student presence and attention span. Interestingly, all respondents agreed that the greatest challenge was the difficulty in maintaining enthusiasm among students, even with using tools such as Padlet and Kahoot to conduct tasks and quizzes. To sustain motivation, some resorted to asking questions regularly, randomly call out names, online peer discussions, and preparing feedback prompts. As per mentioned by one of the respondents, you do not know if they are with you or listening to you. The inability to not know and see their facial reaction added to instructors' frustration in maintaining enthusiasm in class. Instructors understood and were sensitive of students' lack of confidence to follow the lesson and raise issues in class. Another challenge was students' short attention span and their reluctance to turn on their video cameras. This result is aligned with Rasmitalida research in 2020. The research findings on students being enthusiastic at the start, but this enthusiasm decreased a month of two into the online class. According to the focus group, the general frustration among instructors was that not all students were responsive, and the silence or no communication posed a challenge for instructors to engage in real discussions. They agreed that this lack of participation could be attributed to students' low confidence, as evidenced in a research done in a London university by Journal and Christian in 2019, and also students not knowing each other well as they would in face-to-face setting. Next, looking into challenges in facilitating learning, there are two main challenges mentioned under findings, which are student interaction and engagement, and also technical or connectivity limitation. Looking into student interaction and engagement, 20 of the respondents mentioned facing difficulties with low interactions and engagements from students to share and respond to the activities conducted. The focus group revealed, firstly, the challenge on students prefer face-to-face interactions and they were too shy to turn on their camera for online interactions, which many a time resulted in spending extra time to convince students to share and respond. This is according to Pitchter and Mayer in 2010. Secondly, the instructors revealed that learners tend to disregard active interactions in a big-size class. Students tend to ignore the instructor and took longer time to respond to the questions or prompts shared during the online session. Another challenge under challenges in facilitating learning is technical or connectivity limitation. Some respondents, to say 11 instructors, recorded technical or connectivity limitation as a challenge in facilitating learning with learners during online session. One of the respondents shared having connectivity issues during heavy rainfall, and unavailability of technical support during emergency situations. The issues caused difficulties for instructors to facilitate effective online learning, as with unstable internet connections, students coming in and out distorted ongoing discussion. As mentioned by Mercado in 2008, that the transition from traditional to e-learning requires that commitment is available from all levels, especially the administration. It is to address possible limitations in resource and conflicting perspectives in e-learning and eliminate constraints. Last but not least, the final challenge highlighted as part of the finding from the research focus on challenges to giving feedback. And under challenges to giving feedback, we focus on two main challenges, which are student commitment and time constraint. 10 of the respondents mentioned facing difficulties with low commitments from students to reflect and react to the feedback shared. The focus group revealed, firstly, the challenge on students not understanding some of the feedback due to unclear messages, which many a time resulted in assumptions and misunderstandings, and this was echoed by research done by Hardavella, Amli Gagnet, Saad et al. In 2017. Secondly, the instructors revealed that learners tend to ignore feedback shared, and more importantly, some did not work on the feedback to make the necessary improvements. More frustration was students not taking their lessons seriously and instructors not knowing what they were up to behind the screen. Second challenge under giving feedback is time constraint. Some respondents listed time constraint as a challenge in sharing timely feedback with learners. One of them shared the need to work around the clock to feedback on learner submissions. Interestingly, all respondents in this category were from the English discipline, which involved the grading of essays, especially instructors added attention to identify ideas and points presented by learners. As proven by Kavanagh and Song in 2014, that providing feedback to students on their writing represents the most important task of an essay. The focus group revealed that most instructors preferred to personalize their feedback on top of the marking rubrics provided. The marking rubrics allowed students to check how they will be graded, and the personalized feedback allowed students to understand and reflect on their learning and make improvements for the next submission. In conclusion, the COVID-19 pandemic was an unintentional and unavoidable disruption that brought the teaching community together to think of novel ways of using and coping with technology to transform online teaching and learning, making it an effective learning alternative for the community. In light of the study findings, it can be concluded that all respondents faced challenges in managing and coping with online teaching and learning during the pandemic. Various platforms used by different institutions have taken over the teaching and learning process from the traditional face-to-face to fully online method. The common challenges faced by instructors were fostering interaction in synchronous learning, student presence and attention span, facilitating learning, and giving feedback. There was a clear connection between information gathered from the respondents and the focus group. The findings of the study highlighted challenges and frustration faced and managed by the instructors in making online learning as effective as the traditional face-to-face teaching method. Lesson learned is that instructors must be open to assessing their teaching styles and students' learning styles and online course content for strategies that can prevent communication, cognitive, and even emotional disconnect between instructor and learner. Finally, there was no statistically significant difference between the instructor's demographic variables and the challenges and frustrations faced in conducting online teaching and learning activities. The findings also disclose that the instructor's attentive use of creative strategies within the constructivist model, which was pushed by the dire need of learning continuity in the education sector during the COVID-19 pandemic, has successfully managed the challenges and frustrations faced. As aptly put by a respondent, the main challenge for the instructors was keeping students engaged and reassuring them that we are doing the best for them, knowing very well students were experiencing adaptability struggles with this new norm of learning. Future research could probe into innovative strategies used active learning strategies by instructors for online learning to break the silence in the online classroom. Also, the collaboration among instructors in institutions of higher learning to create communities of practice to take fully online teaching and learning to greater heights. That is all from me. Thank you for listening.